This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, welcome to Drinking with Authors, the Literary Briefs edition. I'm your host, Erica Lance. With me today... I didn't get the whole thing out yet. What the hell is wrong with you?
Sometimes you say it, sometimes you don't.
You know what? I do not need this pressure from you, Missy.
My delay is terrible.
Okay, our guest today is Brian McClellan. You are, I don't even know what to say about you. Welcome to the show. Woo! Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking now, since Jen has completely messed up the intro. I am drinking Kettle One Botanical Vodka Spritz, 3.6% alcohol. They're there. You may want to put a shot of vodka in these if you get them, just warning you, but this one is peach, orange, and orange blossom. Jen?
I'm still drinking Earl Grey tea in my Lilo and Stitch mug.
Brian, what are you drinking?
I am drinking High West whiskey from the distillery on the other side of the mountain from me.
What is the other side of the mountain from you?
The other side of the mountain from me is Park City, which is the hoity-toity area of Utah where a lot of the Sundance Film Festival happens. Big ski resort. And every fall, I invite a bunch of my high school buddies out to my house to hang out for the weekend. And a couple years ago, my best friend said, there is a whiskey distillery that I really like their whiskey over in Park City. Can we go to that? And so we spent a day up in Park City, and I bought a couple of bottles, and I'm actually not much of a drinker. I still am. This is actually the last of the first bottle. And so yeah, but it's fancy and it's fun, and honestly the distillery is great. The restaurant there is great too.
That is awesome. Obviously you can pretty much get craft beer anywhere you live nowadays because craft beer is everywhere, but there are some local distilleries here where we live in the Tampa Bay area that are kind of amazing. But if you start doing a podcast that involves the word drinking, every present from your friends from that point on involves a bottle of alcohol, because they assume that what you really need is more alcohol all the time. My bar is ridiculous. I have so much alcohol that, and I appreciate it, but yes, okay. So we're into rapid fire questions, my friend. Are you ready?
Oh, good.
Okay, that didn't sound ready, but we're going to do it anyway. What is your favorite book of all time?
Oh man. When this is asked, I'm really bad at choosing like favorite anything. I usually do like a top 5 kind of thing, but I'll probably go with Count of Monte Cristo.
Very cool. Why?
Because it's awesome. Because it's the book that has everything, right? It's got revenge and romance and duels and it's really freaking good. I read the unabridged Count of Monte Cristo when I was like 12 or 13, and I fell in love with it. I didn't understand half of it at that point, but I fell in love with it, and it's just stupidly good. And I don't know. I'm a sucker for the slow burn, cold revenge story. For those that read my books, you'll notice that I have and I've talked about this on panels before, that I have kind of a disdain for the farm boy trope of epic fantasy. The young, inexperienced person who comes off the farm and immediately is the world's best general, and the world's best duelist and all that stuff. And so people that read my books will know that I really like having kind of competent characters that are either in their prime or past their prime, well-trained, kind of badass kind of characters. And that's kind of like that, like the second half of Count of Monte Cristo, watching, the Count just absolutely flay his enemies. It's just, it's beautiful.
Little following that up, what is the least favorite book of all time?
Um, God, I can't remember the name of it. It was something Thomas Hardy wrote. And I know that because I read it in college in one of my literature classes. And I had to give a presentation on it. And I started the presentation by saying the world would be better if Thomas Hardy had been smothered in his cradle. And then I found out after my presentation, I found out he was my teacher's favorite author. And so
Yikes.
that didn't go well for my grade in that class. But I genuinely, I don't remember what the book was. I'm sure he wrote tons of horrible books. But I have very little patience for boring, depressing kind of like English literature sort of. I don't like it.
Super pretentious.
Right, that kind of pretentious, like the world is awful and we're all going to die alone, sort of. Yeah, I've never liked it, even as a kid. You know, in English classes, I always skipped those books. And honestly, I think that book that I had to give a report on, I'm pretty sure I only read the first few chapters. And I read the first, because that was my MO in college. Because I'm very good at bullshitting things. And so my MO in college was read the first few chapters. If it's fun, I'll finish the book probably tonight. If it's really stupid or boring, then I will check Spark Notes, or I'll skim through and I'll read the final chapter or whatever. And honestly, there's a lot of that kind of English lit sort of pretentious, boring, depressing crap that I did that, like, you know what? I'm sure someone smarter than me finds this book amazing and has lots of good reasons for it. I think it sucks.
I'm assuming you don't finish books then when you start them, that you are like, and I'm done. This is terrible.
Yeah, I don't have the attention span for that. If a book does not keep me going, then and sometimes if a book does keep me going, I'll still not finish it. I'm really bad. When I was a teenager, I would read voraciously, and I would plow through pretty much anything as long as it was a bit exciting. But then once I actually became a professional author, I barely read anymore, which is a little bit sad. But like it's that kind of, it's the knowing how the sausage was made thing, where you're kind of like, I know how plots are constructed. I know how characters are designed. I basically know what the plot of this book is going to be. And they're not going to surprise me. And so I don't know. I don't even really watch a lot of like dramatic television. I tend to be very much into, like, if I'm not working, which creating dramatic, interesting things is my job. If I'm not working, I prefer to like watch comedy, watch a stand-up special, or like a British panel show, or just something that is not what I do for a living.
It's interesting you say that. I have that a lot with books too. There are books I like to read just because they're entertaining to me in that moment, but they're not like investing. I do not have to get invested in the book to read the book, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. I can pick it up, put it down. And then there are books, when I do that, and it's true with movies and stuff too, where you see how the plot goes and you're like, this is what's going to happen. And then it's true, they stop being entertaining. I love it when you read the book and you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, what did they just do? I love that effect in a book. When somebody does that, I always have such admiration when they twist things in such a way that there were no breadcrumbs, and then you arrive somewhere and you're like, oh my God. But they do it well, where they're also not throwing you out of the story. I think that's a talent, where they don't suddenly have the character do something that you're like, what just happened there? Instead you're like, what the mom earmuffs, what the fuck just happened? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I actually I love that and admire that a ton. Do you game? Are you a gamer? Were you a gamer?
Yes.
You strike me as a gamer. So
I do a lot of gaming, mostly video games. I Yeah, it's a problem. Not as much of a problem after I went cold turkey off of League of Legends like 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, that's my biggest, probably the biggest time sink of my hobbies is video games.
What are you playing right now?
I just got back to Rimworld, which is this little indie, kind of survival city building game, which is kind of my jam. I don't. Occasionally, I'll get into like a first person shooter, but it's pretty rare. And I used to be really into like real time strategy, but real time strategy kind of went away. Once Blizzard kind of stopped making strategy games, and Westwood closed and stuff like that, you just there's not a lot of like I don't know. I guess there's probably plenty of real time strategy. It just none of it interests me anymore. So I'm very much into kind of slow burns strategy kind of city builders where you kind of have to balance lots of different factors to keep your little people, your fake people alive. And
Have you thought about doing choose your own adventure books for adults if you like that sort of thing? That is a long, drawn out, slow burn, and it takes a lot of planning and strategy to do a build your own adventure or read your, whatever.
yeah,
Or
see, but I don't want to do it professionally. I just want to do it for fun. I occasionally think it would be a huge amount of fun to work on a video game, like as a writer, but then I realize, oh wait, this is what I do for fun, and if I do it professionally, I will ruin it. Maybe forever, or maybe just a little bit. But I'm good at epic fantasy novels. I'll stick with that for now.
So what are you reading right now, if anything?
Oh man, I'm not really reading anything. I don't like I was saying, I don't really read that much, which is actually kind of one of the biggest regrets of my adult life is that I don't read very much anymore. I do listen to podcasts, and I love history stuff. So if I do read, it tends to be in the form of an audiobook. If I'm going on a road trip, or if I'm just planning a weekend of playing like a mindless game, I'll throw on an audiobook in the background, and I'll just listen. And so I don't really, gosh, it's been a while since I've listened to an audiobook. Um, but I listen to a couple of history podcasts, which are kind of the next best thing from listening from a history audiobook. Um, and and that tends to be kind of both personal interest because I find it interesting, but also kind of a professional sort of, oh yeah, this is probably going to give me fodder for interesting characters and cool events and stuff like that.
you do a lot of research into your books. You talked about it being Napoleon-esque and stuff like that. Do you do a lot of research into certain events to guide what you put in your book, or do you just wing it?
I am a Wikipedia researcher. If I can't find it on Wikipedia, it's not going in the book. um, but I mean, I guess that's why I write epic fantasy, like Secondary World, is that I don't have to get facts right. Like it's, if I need to look up, like, yeah, of course I'm gonna like do research on very basic things like military structure, or how what the muzzle velocity of like a flintlock rifle is going to be, things like that. I'll look that kind of stuff up. But in terms of some reader or some writers they'll get a stack of 15 books and voraciously pour through each one and do notes and things like that. And honestly, I have a huge amount of respect for people that have the patience to do that. But my attention span is just not able to deal with that. And so it tends to be very loose with me, where I'll just my kind of I'll do research on basic facts that I need to put into the book. But in terms of anything deeper, it's just vague inspiration of, oh, that's a really interesting thing that I just learned about this particular time period. I'll jot a little note down to revisit that later, and I might use something similar in a future book. And that's basically the end of it.
Where do you get your inspiration for your next stories? Because you said you did You seem to do books in threes, right? And then little novellas off of that.
Mhm.
Where do you get your inspiration for the little novellas?
For that, it'll be honestly, they tend to be. This is another reason I don't like schedules because, especially for my self-published stuff, is that it tends to just kind of come to me, and it'll be like, oh, this thing that I just learned about, it's kind of interesting, and it could really fit this character that I in this book, but the character doesn't do anything like this in the book, so maybe I'll throw this into a novella and I'll write a little bit of a I'll write a little side story with this character that's influenced by something cool I just read. And then I'll just kind of build it up, and oftentimes, especially with novellas, because novellas are incredibly straightforward, and that's why I kind of enjoy writing them, because my epic fantasy novels are my shortest one is 165,000 words, and with 3 points of view. And so very complex, very intertwined. You really have to get everything right from a lot of different angles. But with a novella, it's a single point of view. It's going to be between 20 and 30,000 words. It's honestly something I can I have in the past, I have had the idea and finished the novella within 2 weeks. And I like that. I like that little self-contained sort of bam idea, bam written, bam off to beta readers. And I kind of love that. But in terms of kind of inspiration, it usually is just it's a shower thought, like something struck me while I was driving to the doctor or whatever, and then over the course of a day or two, like my brain will just kind of play with that idea until I get the basic shape of a story. And I don't really plot my novels, but my novellas I plot very tightly because they're so short, they're so easy to and self-contained. I will sit down and I will plot it out very strictly of this is what this chapter is, that's the next chapter, that's the next chapter. And the novella is only going to be 8 to 12 chapters or something like that, and so it's really easy to just get it all sorted out in a single afternoon and then start writing.
Do you put people you know into your books?
No. No, I especially with Promise of Blood, I included descriptions and a little bit of, there's a couple of my siblings kind of, show up kind of as characters, and everybody noticed, and that kind of annoys me because it wasn't really on purpose. And so I now go out of my way to not have people that are vaguely representative of people I know, because I did that before, and some of them consciously, some of them subconsciously, and I just and it kind of annoys me when people say, oh, this character is so and so, and I'm kind of like, no, they're not. Like, maybe you as the reader got that out of that, but it's not even, that is not what I had in mind. And so I don't know, it's a weird, like, it's a weird thing to be annoyed by, but it definitely bugs me.
What about other author friends or people you talk to that go, hey, will you read my book? How do you handle that?
Oh man, that is rough because, like I said, I don't read for pleasure like at all anymore. So I don't even read the things that I want to be reading, let alone somebody's book. And I get an email probably every couple of weeks from somebody saying, hey, do you think you'd be willing to look at this? And I always have to just say, look, I'm really sorry, I don't have time. I just because, and I try to be really polite about it because there's no need to be a dick about it or anything, but it's like I said, I'm not even reading the stuff I want to read because I just don't have that kind of I guess emotional / creative energy. All of that goes into creating books, not reading them, for me anyways. And so yeah, I don't even read books by people that are friends of mine most of the time. Occasionally something will spark my imagination and I will go ahead and read something, but it's pretty rare. And I always feel a little bad about that because you have a lot of writers are voracious readers, and so I'll see, so and so has given a cover quote for 85 books this year. And I'm like, man, how did you get the energy to read all of that, let alone try to come up with a pithy sentence about it? Because honestly, the pithy sentence is far worse than actually reading it. And so yeah, I don't know. It's such an awkward thing, and I always it becomes, I think it's more awkward for me sometimes than it is for them, because I always feel really bad about saying no, but I also always say no.
No, and I think most authors that I talk to say no, because you do run into that situation with, what if it's bad? Like they're
Yeah,
asking you to read it so that you write something about it, for instance, right? They want that little one liner or the blurb on the back of their book, like not the actual blurb, but like a, look at these authors that have read it and said it's fantastic, ergo your name is attached to it when they
yeah,
go to publish it, blah blah blah. But then if it's crap, what the hell do you do? It definitely puts you in a really awkward position when it comes to that, not just timing wise, but relationship wise, if it's not your cup of tea or there's something about it that you don't like, which can happen. We all have opinions on stuff like that. What about reviews for you? Do you read your reviews?
when my career first started, I read every single review. um because you're starting in a vacuum. You don't know whether you're good or not. You've just had like your agent tell you you're good, and that's it. um and so yeah, I used to constantly read every single review, and I just don't anymore. Like if something, I'll the only reviews I ever read anymore are the ones that like pop up on Instagram in a foreign language. And then I'll hit the little translate button to make sure that they didn't hate it before I like retweet it or something like that. um and that's basically all the review readings that I will do. When a book first comes out, and I'll get trade reviews like in like library journals and stuff like that, then yeah, I'll read those ones, because those are fairly important, because you're going to probably get more readers from that review than you will from a normal review. um but yeah, I try not to, because reviews are stressful. And 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 there's always like the 4.5 star reviews that are like, this was amazing, and they'll gush about you for like 3 paragraphs, and they'll have a single sentence of criticism, and your stupid human brain like latches onto that single sentence of criticism, and it ruins your day. And you're just, oh, it's not worth it.
No, that makes sense. What about you write high fantasy? Have you thought about writing in different genres?
Like I have my self-published urban fantasy, but urban fantasy is not, it's not a huge jump or anything from epic fantasy. um I don't know, I'm not, I don't think so. I mean, I guess within genre, I suppose. I've got science fiction ideas, some space opera stuff I would love to play with someday. um but my career as it is pretty much locked into epic fantasy guy. And that's cool. I like it, and I'm still enjoying writing it. And so at the moment, I'm pretty cool with being epic fantasy guy. And I'll, if there's something else that I really want to write, then I'll do it at some point when I get the time. um
So when you are on deadline and you're writing, do you listen to music or no?
no, no, when I
Mm,
write, I need dead silence. um
okay.
I know some authors who love to have music on in the backgrounds, or even will construct soundtracks to listen to while they're, and man, I just cannot do it. It Very occasionally I will listen to some music to amp myself up for writing. Um, but as soon as the writing starts, everything is off. Period. I can't have distractions or anything else going on.
What about story graveyards? Do you have a story graveyard where you have started to write and you're like, nah?
I mean, yeah, I don't even have it organized or anything. I've just got files in Dropbox somewhere of things that I wrote a couple of pages in, and then either I got distracted with something I was under contract with, or I just wasn't that interested in whatever I was starting, and then it just never continued. So yeah, I've got a few of those. and I've got a couple of projects that are kind of just on the back burner for when I really want to work on something, or when I have some, when I have a few months, or the next time I don't have a contract undertaken. So yeah, there's definitely those things sitting out there. But I tend to be one of those people that I really like to, if I'm gonna put the work into world building and creating like a setting, I want to just finish it. I want to go all the way through it. And so I don't have very many projects that I haven't finished, but they're definitely there.
Do you write short stories?
No, I've done a couple of Powder Mage short stories. But in terms of like original, actually writing 3,000 word whatever, no, I can't. It's so small and constraining. I hate that little form. Even my short stories are like 8,000 words. The couple of Powder Mage ones I've done. And so I don't like the little tiny, I don't like the constraints of trying to write in a really small amount of space.
I I've heard that there's authors that just can't. I've met authors that literally can't. If you go, you have this limitation, they submit and you're like, okay, that's 25,000 words. I said 2,500 words.
Yeah.
And they're like, I know, but I cut it down. And I'm like, from what the hell did you cut it down? It was supposed to be like 5 pages. What the hell is wrong with you? But they can't. They just cannot write in that tiny little area of doing it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a flash fiction that's like 100 words.
Right. Like, I guess it goes back to me, like what I was saying just a moment ago, that is that if I'm going to take the time to create a world, then I want to spend time in that world. I don't really want to waste I don't want to waste a perfectly good fantasy world on a few thousand words, or less even. It's just, it feels like I've wasted my time and I've wasted the reader's time, because I don't know. I do have I have a deep respect for people who are able to do that, but I don't know. Things take a lot longer to percolate in my brain, I think, than some authors. And so when something's cooked in my brain, I want to serve the full course meal. I don't want to just do like a tiny little something.
No,
it's a great analogy. I love that. So who you're in
question, Jen.
I do. All right, the pressure. Your genre is epic fantasy. So who are your inspirational authors? Like who in that genre really inspired you in terms of writing?
I came up under Brandon Sanderson just because I took classes from him when he was still very new. But like in terms of like outside of Brandon, who I know personally, like very much Joe Abercrombie, Stephen Erickson, some of these guys who just have created these awesome kind of, I kind of love kind of the military epic fantasy, which is what Powder Mage is. And so I don't know, I've always enjoyed that. And some of these guys like Stephen Erickson is a really hard one to talk about because he is so good at world building, and so expansive, and like I like the audiobooks for the Malzahn Book of the Fallen, like all 10 books, it's like 600 hours or something like that. It's massive. And his stuff is way more expansive than mine is, or probably ever will be. But like Joe Abercrombie's probably a lot closer. When I set out to write Promise of Blood, I actually very specifically told myself that I wanted to write in terms of content and character creation, and even like kind of how dark I was willing to go with the world and things like that. I wanted to be right between Joe Abercrombie and Brandon Sanderson. And so that kind of influenced where I was going with that.
Cool. Okay. We've gotten to the end of this podcast. I thank you so much for being on it. What is the next book that's coming out right now as it stands?
my next book, as it stands, unless I get something, one of my little self-published out sometime the end of this summer, hopefully, fingers crossed. But my next contracted book is In the Shadow of Lightning. It's a brand new big epic fantasy world, and it's coming out from Tor in June of 2022, or at least right now I think it's June. They may shift that by a month or two in either direction. But yeah, so that'll be out next summer. And the In the Shadow of Lightning, book 1 of the Glass Immortals.
And what is the premise behind this particular delightful series?
The premise behind this series is it is about the main character is a young man who is a failed prodigy within an imperial system that is where a very cutthroat imperial system of large guild families, always jockeying for position. And this young man was a failed prodigy, and his mother is murdered. She's a prominent politician, and she's murdered, and he has to come home and take control of his little guild family, and then try not to be crushed as he figures out a way to save magic that runs the empire.
Wow. This sounds fun.
Cool.
And how many books are planned in this one? 3?
At the moment, it is a trilogy. So we'll see how that goes over the next couple of years. Sometimes these things balloon and sometimes they don't. So
very, very cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Wait, quick. How do people find you? I almost forgot to ask that.
They can find me at brianmcclellan.com or at Brian T. McClellan on Twitter. And they can Google Powder Mage to find all of my Powder Mage books. Promise of Blood is the first one.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank
Of
you.
course.
This was fun.
Yes. Okay. So I've been your host, Erica Lance, and with me has been
J.M. Paquette.
and we will see you next time.